You are listening to the Marc Guzman Podcast Experience. But it's managing teachers is different because you have some teachers that really want to make change. You have other teachers that really want to stay status quo. And actually, this is a perfect time to bring up something that really caught my eye in your book here are the different types of leaders here. And you have the manager, the driver, and the peacekeeper. And then you add the listening leader, which, your book is based around. And I find that so true, and not just in the schooling and education system, but everywhere in business. I mean, if you look and analyze big corporations in any business, you do have the manager, you do have the peacekeeper who, stays with status quo, but doesn't want to ruffle anyone's feathers. But they also help unite people. Right? And you actually see the peacekeepers, how much damage they cause when they get fired or let go because when they voluntarily leave because they take others with them that really support that person.
Point. Yeah.
Right? So I love your book because I know it's geared toward the education system, but I really think it's a must read for anyone in business because everything there can be easily applied and translates over to business.
Yeah, that's great to hear. It makes me feel good. Yeah, those archetypes, I took a long time to build those and kind of kept reshaping the language. But I do like how it turned out because I can pretty much take any leader I've worked with, and I coach and support a lot of principals and other executive leaders now, and I can locate them. I can think about where they are. And it traces back to so many things, personality, birth order, just all these different, you kind of can fall into a script or a way of being in the work. But I think that's where the growth comes, is being able to move past that or to grow some new skills outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Now, listening. This might sound like a stupid question, but I know when you start diving into it, and I want to get your perspective on this. Why is it important to listen?
Man, I learned more than I ever want to know about listening from the research process behind this book. And I was just stunned. I mean, it almost was like a hypothesis that this skill, focusing on this one thing, could be a lever for really massive change in schools. And then as I kind of peeled the onion back and studied it, it kept getting affirmed for me. Listening sounds so simple, but as I tried to prove in the book, it's actually a very complex and sophisticated art. And in some ways, from a leadership perspective, a technology, a thing that you can actually, anatomize and break down into parts and learn each of the individual parts. So why is it important? One of the themes in the book is just that when you listen skillfully and intentionally, you build relational capital with others, right? You build this resource between you and stakeholders.
Context.
Yeah. And you can't actually make change without that. So in the school setting, there's just been all these top-down initiatives, right, around curriculum and testing, and we expect people are just going to comply. But if you really want to make change at your school, you have to have that foundation of relational capital. I think the other thing with listening, and it kind of connects to before our podcast, we were talking about marketing and listening, that it's like an assessment tool. It's how you it's like a diagnostic, right? If you listen really intentionally and with the right set of moves and lenses, you can discover so much about the people around you.
Yeah.
That becomes data. Right? It's not the typical quantitative data, but it is perceptual data, or it's, experiential data for making decisions. And you end up making better decisions through that data.
Yeah. I recently told someone that being a business owner and self-employed is, in a way, a blessing because people are paying you money to do what you want to do. Right? And I think as a business owner, you really have to listen to your customers, to the people that you do business with, because that's where you can figure out what they want, the value that you can bring to them. One of the things I did early on in my career as a property manager is a lot of property managers will go out and say, oh, I'm the best neighborhood specialist, this and that, right? But I was trying to think of ways, well, how can I bring value to my client, right? The landlord, I'm going to be managing their property. And I started to listen. I just listened. I asked one simple question: what's your main concern? And then every time I had conversations with them, I would just listen to what they said. And I figured out very quickly that just by listening, I found out that their biggest concern is, how long is my rental going to be vacant for? They didn't care about the price they were going to get. They didn't care about, how long the tenant's going to be there or what other issues. All that can be fixed. But how long is it going to be empty for? That was their biggest concern. So then I simply changed my marketing around, changed my business to then build up a tenant following. And then I can come back to owners and say, hey, we can rent out your property a lot faster than you think because I've got a tenant following. And I've got...
You have like a collective, a pool of people.
Yeah, 3,000 people on my email list that are looking for rentals, and I'm blasting out every single week. We can rent out your property much faster than the next guy can.
And that worked.
And ever since I changed my marketing, because I started to listen to what they really wanted, my business blew up.
That's
at
awesome.
that point.
Yeah.
And
it's so strategic.
Yeah, and that's what you literally talk about in your book. Now, your book is it mainly for other educators, or is it like from educator to educator, or can someone use it for educator to student?
Yeah, I would say it's mostly adult to adult, but there's a chapter, a guest author chapter in the middle, chapter 8, about listening to students. And that is really geared toward teachers, a little bit administrators, but more teachers for, here's some ways that you can bring this technology into the classroom. But I appreciate what you said. I think, there's a lot of arbitrary decision making that happens in any school or business. And I think when you listen, you actually get much more strategic and focused on what's going to make a difference. And what is the strategy that's actually going to work for what I'm trying to do. You can't figure that out without listening closely to people, right?
Yeah, and I guess this goes back to how you started the school, in that you went out to the community to ask people what they wanted.
That's right. Yeah, and the vision emerged from that.
So how do you apply the book's principles? Thank you for listening to this podcast short. For more podcast content, be sure to subscribe to all of our podcast channels on YouTube, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Libsyn, Castbox, Podbean, and literally anywhere else you listen to podcasts.